Evening, everybody. Welcome to the Fighting Irish virtual event of the Irish Whiskey Society America. Uh, those of you that may not know me, I'm Allan Dwyer, president of the club. And tonight we're going to have what I think will be a fun event. I'm looking forward to it. Those of you who have done events with me in the past know that I like to do theme-oriented events. And normally when we do the virtuals, it's, either to launch a new brand or it's with a distillery or a brand ambassador, which is great. Don't get me wrong. That's kind of what I look forward to because, I don't want to hear myself talk for 2 hours about whiskey generally either. So, but when I do events, I like to have themes because there's only so much you can talk about whiskey. At least that's how I feel. So it's nice to have something that kind of ties it all together. So this event is really more about, well, I shouldn't say more. It started more with the theme, and then the whiskeys were built around it, as opposed to the other way around, which is typically how we would do it. So the theme is Fighting Irish, and some who know me and know of my background as a Notre Dame alum might think this is going to be a shout out to my alma mater. It's not. It's actually about the history of Ireland and famous battles in Ireland, and just kind of the phrase "fighting Irish," where it came from, and actually how it has actually led to quite a few Irish whiskey releases. Not all of which we're going to do tonight, but I'll mention a few that we won't be doing, but that are also linked to the whole idea of the Fighting Irish. So, having said that, what we're going to do tonight, we're going to go in reverse chronological order in terms of the whiskeys. So you should have 5 whiskeys. And we're going to start, like I said, reverse chronological order. So if you want to, if you're looking to kind of which one to pour first, we're going to start with the proclamation. And I won't talk too much longer, and then we'll kind of kick off. We'll do a toast, and we'll start with that one. So if you want to be pouring that one, while I talk for another minute or two here. So again, as I was saying, the theme is Fighting Irish tonight. And really what I wanted to do was knowing a bunch of the whiskeys, the brands that exist, and kind of their origin or what they were, where they're from. I thought this would make for an interesting theme. So I am by no means a historian or librarian. If anybody else is, hopefully you're not going to fact check me too much tonight. This is all kind of in fun. You might learn something. You might forget everything we talk about tonight, but in the end, we'll hopefully enjoy some whiskeys and have some good crack. So you might be wondering, well, how did I come up with this, or why am I doing this now? Part of this too, the idea was to do this in the month of April. And that's because historically a lot's happened in April. Both the Easter Rising and the Battle of Clontarf happened Good Friday, Easter weekend, different centuries, but both right around now. So today's the 19th. One was the 23rd, one was the 24th. So pretty close to when they actually occurred in history. So we're going to talk about those tonight. So that's kind of a little bit of the timing. Why did I pick April to do this theme? As far as the phrase or theme itself, fighting Irish, um, the kind of the derivation of that has a few different sources if you were to Google or do any kind of research. But it seems like the earliest um, acknowledgement of it was during the U.S. Civil War, where the Irish immigrants that had come over actually fought for the Union Army and represented a pretty good portion of it, 20% by most counts. And they really garnered a reputation for being, very good fighters in that effort. Um, there were several regiments that existed. So three of them were in New York, one was in Pennsylvania, one was in Massachusetts. Some of you may be familiar with the Fighting 69th Regiment out of New York. They actually have a whiskey, and proceeds go to support that regiment. But they were one of the most renowned of the time, and they still do parades and celebrations and stuff. So um, that was kind of the start of it. Over time, the phrase became less endearing and positive and more disparaging, and took on a negative connotation in the early 20th century. A lot of it was partially driven by stuff like the KKK, the anti-Irish, anti-Catholic type stuff that was happening. So that was, and there was pushback. One of those incidents actually occurred in South Bend at the University of Notre Dame against the Klan, where the student body kind of took up against and had a little bit of an uprising against the Klan. And that incident, as well as a lot of the newspapers who were describing the Notre Dame football team at the time for their underdog style and the fact that they would travel anywhere and the way they played under legendary coach Knute Rockne. He actually liked the term, even though it was somewhat negative still at the time, and kind of embraced it. So it was unofficial because the Notre Dame football team at the time, actually, their nickname it changed a couple times, but it was the Catholics at one point. So they didn't actually become the Fighting Irish until 1927. So about 100 years ago. But you could argue that, so the term existed or the phrase existed, well before that, changed meanings or was used in different ways over the century. You could argue, though, that Notre Dame adopting it and then the success that they had under Rockne in particular, really popularized the phrase and kind of took on, its own meaning and more of a positive, depending on whether or not you're a fan, I suppose, or not. But in any case, it certainly made the phrase part of the, the discussion out there for the last century or so. So that's kind of a real quick down and dirty of the phrase. Again, I'm sure if you were to do research and stuff, you could find more about it, but that's, the term. As far as some of the historical events that tie into this, again, I'm going to go in reverse chronological order. So the first whiskey we're going to have tonight is the Proclamation. So for those of you that aren't familiar with it, Proclamation was the document that was read as part of the Easter Rising to declare Ireland's independence back in 1916. So the Easter Rising happened Back then, Good Friday, that weekend went on for several days. A lot of it, if you've been to Dublin and you go on O'Connell Street in front of the General Post Office, there's a little bit of a mini tour there that you can do, as well as if you were to take a tour of the Kilmainham Jail, a lot of history around the city of Dublin about this event. But basically, the proclamation was their Declaration of Independence. Kind of a copy of it here I'm showing you. It was signed by 7 individuals that took part in the rebellion, who were all executed for treason by the British after capture. And so what this first whiskey we have, the proclamation, if you don't have a full bottle, with you in the sample, but that's what the bottle looks like. They actually have a copy of the proclamation or the style of the document on it. And what this this is a blend sourced from Great Northern. And the whole idea was to play up the independence angle, and try to appeal to a U.S. marketplace where it kind of launched first. It's triple distilled. Again, I've got some tasting notes for you here. It's bourbon cask and then a little bit of a sherry finish to it. One of the significant things worth mentioning is I mentioned a minute ago that there were 7 signatures that are down here at the bottom that signed this. And as part of kind of a nod to those 7 individuals, the proclamation was bottled at 40.7% ABV. So not your typical 40, just did a little extra to kind of honor those individuals. So that's the proclamation. And what I can do here. So sláinte, everyone. You haven't already. One of the things I should mention too tonight is everything we're going to be drinking is, for the most part, on the lower end of the ABV scale. A lot of bourbon matured whiskeys, so not a lot of high ABV or extravagant wine finishes or anything like that. But what we do, I think, so what's going to differentiate a lot of what we do tonight is the fact that the liquids are from different distilleries. So, for example, the proclamation is from Great Northern, and what you'll see when we tackle the next several, I think we have 4 different distilleries represented tonight. So when you kind of look at it on the surface, you say, oh, a lot of these are very similar, but that's going to be probably one of the main differences tonight, is that they're coming from different makers. Has anybody had this before?
No.
Yeah, I have. I love the attention to detail too. I didn't know about the 0.7 and what it referenced. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah. So a couple other things I can add. I was in this event in one form or another, has been kind of in the making for a couple of years, you could argue. So this same time last year, I was trying to put this together and couldn't. I was in conversation with the guys from Proclamation, because it's an independent brand, sourced whiskey, and just wasn't able to pull it together in time to get samples and stuff from them. And then did our trip to Dublin and Whiskey Live and all that. And then over that time span, the brand kind of ended and switched. So it went, if you receive, you can still find these bottles in the States, but they don't technically make it anymore. What they did was they switched. Still looks very similar, but the brand changed from Proclamation to Independence. So you might see a bottle that looks very similar that says Independence. It's not actually the same liquid. It's sourced still, but it's actually got a stout beer finish to it. So it's a little bit different. So I haven't had specific conversations with them about that, but I think what was happening was weren't getting maybe the traction they were looking for. Maybe the Proclamation name wasn't, unless you're a history buff or whatever, you didn't, wasn't hitting the mark with the audience, so to speak. So they changed it to Independence, which is a little bit probably easier to embrace or understand. So if you like this and you see a bottle out there, I would say grab it up because it's relatively inexpensive. And they might be actually trying to even clear it from the shelves, because it's not going to get restocked, I don't believe. So just something to keep in mind if you should see a bottle. You might be able to pick it up for about $20. So we think we did this as part of the member group trip last year when we did our walking tour to kick off our Dublin trip. We stopped at the General Post Office and did a toast with this whiskey. So, I think, there's a lot of obviously significance to the event itself. The rebellion wasn't successful in one sense, in that they were, it was put down by the British, and the 7 people that signed the proclamation were all executed. But what it did is, because of a lot of the way they were treated, really shifted sentiment, because I guess arguably you could say not everybody was in favor of independence prior to this. And this event really started to turn the tide and increase the sentiment for an independent republic. And then so subsequent to this, you had, the war and Michael Collins and things like that. So this was really maybe one of the kicking off points. So that's, I think why it triggered to have a whiskey named after it. My, you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with the books that have been around forever on particular subjects, like you can get algebra for dummies, or Irish history for dummies probably exists, things like that. So this would be, Irish history for whiskey fans. We're gonna learn our history by drinking whiskey. That's
Just kind of learning.
Yeah, so that's about the extent of how much I want to so there's no quizzes or tests or anything like that at the end of this. All right. So let's move on. And one of the things maybe we can do too, if you still have any left, or not that you have to, but at the end we can maybe do a go around and just see maybe what people enjoyed the most tonight out of the five whiskeys. All right, so let's move on, kind of going back in time. So that we started off in about 100 years ago, 1916. Now we're going to go back roughly another 100 years. Again, there were several other whiskeys that could have been involved in this theme, but at some point you got to draw the line, I suppose. So I thought five was a good way to do it. But the dead rabbits. So a lot of people might be familiar with this already, either from the book or the movie that ultimately it was based on, from Martin Scorsese, that starred Daniel Day-Lewis and Leonardo DiCaprio, amongst others. So that was a pretty big movie. Took some liberties, from what I understand. Obviously, I wasn't there at the time, but if you read about it, it's a movie. But I think what it did was capture a lot of what was going on in New York. So we moved from Ireland to American soil. So what you had happening was, with Irish immigration to the States, particularly New York, in the 1800s, growing Irish population in New York, and weren't all met, or weren't embraced, let's say. So some of you may be familiar with the things like, no Irish to apply, things like that. It went, obviously a lot further than that. So you had rival gangs in New York, in the area, lower Manhattan, known as the Five Points. So the Dead Rabbits were a mostly Irish gang. And one of the rival gangs were the nativists, who were anti-Irish. So they were, so I think that would have been one of the gangs popularized by the Daniel Day-Lewis character in the movie, who was big on American, if you were born there, nativism, that whole thing. So a lot of the same themes from a couple hundred years ago that were, arguably similar today, just different countries. But they really were fighting for Irish rights, to the point where, a lot of violent fights on the streets, but they also got involved in politics, Tammany Hall, things like that. So if any of you have seen the movie, a lot of it's somewhat, it's all been woven into a film, but a lot of those themes are accurate to that extent. So the whole idea was to fight for Irish rights. So it does play into the whole fighting Irish in that regard, plus the actual fights that would occur on the street. One of the characters that got popularized within the Dead Rabbits too, was, that you might have heard of, as Hellcat Maggie. So that she was, or is thought to have been, one of the Dead Rabbits, and the rumor was that she actually filed her teeth for fighting purposes. And some of you may even have seen or had the Irish whiskey that's named for her, Hellcat Maggie. It's another blend. So again, there were plenty of options that we could have included in this theme, but again, drew the line. So that was Hellcat Maggie's another blend that's out there, source blend, that is named for one of the Dead Rabbit characters. So that's kind of the history. So this was all happening early 1800s through the mid 1850, leading Civil War time, because a lot of this too was when they were doing the draft and trying to get people to sign up, and that's how a lot of Irish became part of the Army for the Union side. So all this was going on. So again, I think the movie's pretty good. If you haven't seen it, worth checking out. Gives you somewhat of an idea, of what was going on back then. But how it ties in to whiskey then is the Dead Rabbit Irish whiskey. So if you've been to New York, there's a pub there called the Dead Rabbit. It's actually in Lower Manhattan on Water Street. It's in the same general neighborhood that the Dead Rabbits would have been active back in the 1800s. Great pub. Can't say enough about it. It's been voted best bar in the world, so don't have to take my word for it. But it was owned and operated by a couple guys from Belfast who had one of the best bars there, were brought over to New York by an American businessman investor who wanted to start up stuff, brought them over. It's got 3 floors. Bottom floor's got 2 bars, 2 sides to it. That's like your traditional Irish pub. They have a cocktail. The second floor is like a cocktail lounge. They've, I think, at least 5 books. So if you're into cocktails, these guys arguably started the Irish whiskey cocktail craze a dozen years ago, and they've got the books to back it up. So if you're looking for a cocktail to make with Irish whiskey, you can buy their books online. But that's the pub. Been around for about a dozen years now. Officially, it's called the Dead Rabbit Grocery and Grog. But a few years ago, they launched an Irish whiskey. It's sourced from Dublin Liberties Distillery. So this is a blend as well. 5 years. Bourbon cask. Finished in virgin oak. A little bit higher ABV than the one we just had. It's 44%. So I think he's showing you a picture there of the bottle.
That's a healthy pour, Allan.
Yeah, well, it's a tiny little glass. I was trying to kill the bottle. I think I underestimated how much was left. So, but it's not as bad as you think. This is a little mini quarter Glencairn.
Let's launch it.
So the first, the Proclamation was a Great Northern liquid distillate. This is from Dublin Liberties. So again, similar style, in terms of a blend and the cask aging. But if you can get a little bit of the difference in terms of, different distilleries. This one started out, it was kind of limited in terms of distribution. You could get it in New York. When I first picked up a couple bottles, I got them from people traveling to New York. I had them bring them back for me. Now you can get it. It's got much wider distribution. You can even get it in Ireland. So you can find it now and get it online, things like that. So has anybody had this before?
Honestly, I like this one a lot, especially for the price range. Mid-40s down here in the Dallas area. Very earthy, spicy. I love this one, actually.
Yeah, it's a very nice blend. Particularly if you're, you like bourbon finishes, and if you're, I particularly like what Virgin Oak does to whiskeys. Usually gives it a nice little spice kick. Um, yeah, so if you're, I like to switch things up personally. Um, so sometimes you're in the mood for a sherry finished whiskey or something with a sweet wine taste. Other times I want just a straight bourbon finished um, whiskey. So it's good to have a little bit of variety. Has anybody seen the movie? Definitely worth checking out. Because obviously it's, I'll call it loosely based on history, but dramatized for Hollywood. Um, but kind of like learning your history by drinking Irish whiskeys. You can learn your history by watching movies by Academy Award winners, and because between the actors and the director, you've got quite a bit of talent there. Um, so, but this the pub itself. Has anybody been to the pub? Yeah, definitely. If you go to New York and you're there and have the time, it's definitely worth checking out. While you're there too, right next to it is Francis Tavern, which is the oldest bar in New York, where a lot of the U.S., the revolutionary participants in the U.S. actually, where that's kind of a walking museum, historical museum itself, owned by the Dingle Group. So it's kind of got a little mini Dingle bar in there too, if you're a fan of Dingle. But Dead Rabbit's great if you just want your traditional Irish pub. It's got you covered, sawdust on the floor, that kind of thing. If you're into cocktails, it's hard to beat as well. So they've actually expanded too. So this was the original in New York. They now have um, other locations. One's in Austin, Texas. You been to that one by any chance, Matt?
No, I have not been to that one, Alan. No.
Yeah, so they've got one there. They've got one in Washington, D.C., and they're working on, I don't think it's opened yet. They're working on New Orleans. So kind of expanding the model, so to speak, to other parts. So um yeah, so all right. So that um is the Dead Rabbit, which then leads us to next on the hit parade. So um CLONTARF. So this brand's been around for quite a while. Um, I would argue, though, it's gone through a few different iterations. The brand's been kind of bought and sold a few times. But before we get into that a little bit, just a little background on, what the brand, where the brand get its name or what it's about. So it's some of you may be familiar. It's Dublin suburb, basically. But the Battle of Clontarf, so now we're going back a few more centuries, but this occurred Good Friday in 1014. So if you're looking at the whiskey box labels, you'll see the 1014 prominently displayed on it. So back, if you go back all the way to, what is this, I guess, beginning of the 11th century. So back then, the Vikings were prominent in the Dublin area in particular. Brian Boru, who some of you may have heard of, was King of Munster, which basically was southwest more or less area. So I kind of listed the counties there for you to give you an idea of kind of what he reigned over. But he was considered the High King of Ireland. And what more or less transpired in this, a lot of the records of this battle arguably are dubious, I guess, if you research it enough, because it's the Battle of Clontarf has been glorified and it's part of mythology now, and it's got a story behind it, which has some truth probably, but there's a little bit of exaggeration, I guess might be the word. So it started off with, back then there wasn't exactly, formal government or anything like that. So a rebellion started in the Dublin area, and Brian Boru brought his army to basically try to put down the rebellion, which was kind of a consortium of different groups, one of which consisted of the Vikings. What's happened as a result, though, is it's kind of become the story now is Brian Boru defeated the Vikings and drove them out of Ireland, which is, I guess, partially true. And ultimately, that's, the Vikings did leave Ireland. But the battle itself has become kind of a symbol of that. And you can even, if you go to Dublin, there's an exhibit there called Dublina that you can see that talks all about the Vikings and the history in Dublin, things like that. But, it was a big, huge battle, lasted several days. Brian Boru actually died during it, although accounts say that he probably didn't actually fight because he was in his 70s. But he was, I think the rumor is he might have been killed while sleeping in his tent. One of his sons was killed. But ironically, his side actually won. So he kind of, what's that saying? Won the battle, lost his life. I don't know, make that saying up. But, it's become a big symbol. I'm showing you a picture here of the harp, the Brian Boru harp. Is a style of harp from back, ancient style. There's actually a copy of this in the Trinity College Museum. And the harp is actually now known, the emblem of Ireland, or one of the main symbols of Ireland. So one of the things, though, that a takeaway from this whole battle was it became a symbol for fighting against invaders and the whole idea of fighting Irish. So that's kind of the tie-in to the theme for tonight. And lucky for us, they also have a bunch of whiskeys. So I thought one of the things that's always been cool about this brand too is that you can find bottles of a lot of different varieties, size bottles of this. 200. I think you can get 35 mil. I've seen, and then of course the full size. But what we have tonight are the 50 ml size, and what's cool about them is the stackable, nature of them. So in the box, stacked up still. You can see the 1014 prominently displayed on the box, as well as all the different bottles. So actually only one of these is available in the States, and that's the Black Label version. The other two you can only get in Europe, let's say Ireland. I'm not I don't know about the full availability outside of Ireland, but I know you can't get them in the States. So good opportunity to try a couple of the other varieties. So this brand has been owned by others. It's now owned, I think, what are we in 24? So I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, Irish Distillers purchased the brand. So Irish Distillers, being Middleton Distillery, Powers, Redbreast, what have you. So where does this brand fit in? It's, considered your everyday whiskey, call it lower end, where, like, so a Redbreast, Middleton would be your high end. This is meant to kind of fit in the value, value Irish whiskey. These are 40%, all bourbon cask matured. So that's kind of where they're meant to fit on the scale. So it's kind of what you might consider an everyday drinker. Depending on how you want to do this tonight yourself, we've got 3 from them. We're going to go in order from top to bottom in terms of the stackability. And we can kind of talk about all 3 at the same time. But the first one is the single malt. So again, this is not available here. It's 40%. And those of you that are familiar with, Middleton, what they do and what they don't do, they're big on the pot still. The single malt is going to be sourced. So it's most likely Bushmills, who they have an arrangement with when they need other malt stuff. They share some bottling and some other things. They've had a relationship for years. So this is most likely a bourbon 40% Bushmills malt, non-age statement. Just kind of quickly going down the list, and then we can, be sampling them. The other 2 are blends. The middle one is called the Reserve. This is going to be a blend of single malt and grain. Again, 40% bourbon cask. So again, this would be most likely grain from Middleton and malt from Bushmills. And then the bottom one, the black label, what makes that different, that's the classic blend. That's the one you can get here. That's actually single pot still from Middleton, 15%, and the rest being grain. So the blends are a little bit different in terms of the mash bill, but the cask maturation is similar, ABVs is similar. But you should, when you're sampling these, that'll be the difference. One's a malt blend, the other's a pot still blend. So we can kind of walk through these. I'm going to start with the single malt first. Has anybody been able to sample any of the Clontarfs that you can't get here, maybe in travels overseas?
No.
The black label is, fairly available, around the States because of it's had decent distribution. It's owned by Castle Brands before Irish Distillers bought it. So kind of similar distribution as like Napogue, Castle stuff, where you'd see that. Which is another sourced Bushmills single malt. What do people think of the single malt?
nose draws me in right away. Big fan of the nose.
Yeah.
Wood, little woody, maybe some dark fruit in there. This is very inviting. Malty too, very malty.
Yeah, I mean, these are, again, all of these are very, what I'd call approachable whiskeys. And price point, they're all going to be, probably the most expensive of all the range we're doing tonight. Dead Rabbit's probably the most expensive. But the Proclamation and the Clontarf, you can easily get, you should be able to find it for under $30. So these are what I'd call value Irish whiskeys, which is nice because, depending on your wealth, for lack of a better term, you can only not, you know what, you can't be drinking, Redbreast 27 every single day. Or I guess you can, but that would get a little bit boring, even if you can afford it. So, it's nice to kind of mix things up, have, everyday drinkers. So, when you think, so where this kind of fits with Irish distillers, there was some that questioned what was going to happen to this brand when they purchased it. But I think they purposely are positioning it, differently than their other blends, which would be Jameson and Powers. So Jameson is, and Powers, though, are both single pot still blends. But they have a much higher proportion of single pot still. So this, when you look at that, the black label, it's only 15%. I think Powers, by contrast, is a 70% single pot still. So that's one of the main differences there. A lot, Jameson has the sherry component, so that's the difference there. So it does still, I think, fit into a different price point and place within the stuff that's coming out of Middleton. In the middle, the 1014 Reserve is going to be most similar to the Proclamation and Dead Rabbit in terms of style blends. Again, low ABV bourbon matured single malt grain blend, but a different distillery. I'd say, but of the three blends, I like the Clontarf probably the least of the three. Or another way to put it is I like the Dead Rabbit and the Proclamation better. I think of the three single malt blend bourbon finishes that we just did.
I think I like the Dead Rabbit the best of the ones.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I'm curious now. I'm going to have the black label, which I have not had this in a while. This is the one you can get in the States. It's got a little bit more spice kick to it than the Reserve blend, and that's, I think, because of the pot still. I like the nose better on the black label too.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, I definitely like the black label blend better than the Reserve blend. But I think I I'm going to circle back to the first two, but before I render a verdict of my own.
Hey, Alan, question on why they give it the name the Reserve? Was it set aside for something, or like, because when I think reserve, I think of something special, not special.
Yeah, I don't know exactly. This is a tough one to get a lot of background on, because if you were to Google stuff on this, the brand goes back, what are we, 2020? I mean, this has not quite a 20-year history, but let's say a 15-year history anyway, at least. So you can find stuff back 15 years ago when it was owned by others. It was arguably sourced by others when it first started. So it's kind of gone through a few different iterations. So I'm not sure, obviously they had stuff they were doing overseas. They didn't bring it here. They were obviously trying to do something at one point. Maybe originally it was a little bit different. Maybe it was a little bit more special to your point. And now it's just kind of settled on these, they decided to make it 40% approachable value whiskeys, as opposed to maybe what they were when they first started out. I'm not exactly sure. It's tough to because I remember when both this and the Pogue were purchased by Irish distillers kind of during the COVID time, and there was a lot of question on what was going to happen to both of the brands. So they've kind of a lot of the information was tough, because if you kind of went to the websites, they weren't being updated. So it was really tough to kind of know what was going on with them. I think Napoleon's definitely done a lot more over the last few years.
Napoga is great. I'm sorry
Yeah.
I missed that one last time you did it, but the
Yeah,
12 to 14 and 16 are wonderful.
yeah, and they've done other releases too. Different finishes, different ABVs. Done a lot of private label store bottlings and stuff. So arguably a lot more has happened with that brand over the last few years than this one. Um, this one was more just again, the tie-in with, I thought the bottling was cool. The tie-in to history, chance to try some things that you can't get here, things like that. So, and then tying it into the whole theme. But yeah, I think of the four blends, I guess. Yeah, I definitely. My favorite of those is gonna be the Dead Rabbit. But I do like the Proclamation. Um, and then of the Clontarfs, I like the Black Label the best.
I kind of like the single malt the best out of the 3 Clontarfs.
Yeah, I think I'm curious to try this up against, say, like the base level Turcano.
Oh yeah,
Which is another non-age statement. Bourbon single malt.
Oh, good thinking there.
Just to see how they kind of stack up against each other. That I'd be curious to do that. So
now you got me thinking.
that's all. That's the whole that's what the educational exercise is for, right? Interesting. So there you go. Now we're off the rails, going off theme.
That's not my intent.
That's fine. Frank, do you have a favorite of the bunch? Oh,
Yep, actually, the classic blend, the Black Label is
yeah.
for me. Although tomorrow is my big day for the Nepog 51 one shot, my birthday.
Oh, happy
So I'm
birthday.
sure that'll override it.
All right. Well, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Frank.
Happy
Yes.
birthday, Frank.
I was gonna say, so I hope you have
Happy birthday.
I hope you have a lot left in that for future years.
I don't think so.
No? All right, well,
No, I've been passing it off a little bit, so
I'll have to keep that in mind because I still have I have an unopened bottle. So it could be a good reason to open it next year or when you run out.
well, if you poke around, there might be a bottle out there somewhere, you know?
Yeah, yep. You can still find it certainly at auctions and stuff. But anybody else? I know some of you jumped on late, might have missed kind of the early going in terms of what we were talking about, but any other questions, comments?
I was thinking I like the Dead Rabbit, and I definitely do, but that classic blend is pretty good also.
Yeah, and I think they're different. So
Yeah, they're definitely different. I'm gonna try to find that.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I'm gonna try to find the Dead Rabbit. I feel like I've seen it around here. But the CLONTARF, the first one, not so great, but the Black Label, I like that more.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a difference, and it's just a different distillery distillate between the Black Label and the Dead Rabbit. And I think too, the Dead Rabbit, the Virgin Oak brings out a different note to it as well than just the straight bourbon cask.
Yeah, the Dead Rabbit is hands down the best one tonight for me. It seems like that's a consensus all around. I just think that it's very complex compared to the rest of the ones we've tried tonight. It gives a little bit of everything. It's got a little fruit, a little earth, a little floral, a little spice to it, a little wood.
Yeah, so these again, the idea on this is a theme oriented lineup. It wasn't because they're all pretty similar, as I talked about earlier. Then it's not like we were going for different flavor profiles with wine finishes or going up or down in ABV or anything like that. All very similar. I would argue the main difference is they came from 4 different distilleries. Which is, I think, going forward, going to be one of the things to be looking for as you sample Irish whiskey, because you've got more and more distilleries that are bringing product to market and or to the States. So you're going to be able to try things because, to be fair, predominantly what's dominated most of the brands that you find in stores on the shelves in America is still made by, it's either Cooley, Great Northern, or Bushmills, or Irish distillers sourced. So a lot of the independent labels and all that's either Great Northern or Cooley. So to some extent, if you've been drinking Irish whiskey for a little while now, your palates have been somewhat trained on the same stuff, and what's maybe differentiated it has been the cask finish. And what you're going to start to see more and more of now, I think, is assuming they can get stuff onto the shelves here, is just different distiller from different distilleries. So Dingle was the first. Waterford's brought stuff. Drumshambo. Who else? There's a few others, but see, you are starting to get some things that aren't sourced from those distilleries I already mentioned. And initially, it might be kind of like, whoa, because it's just going to be very different. I think some people love Dingle. Some people find it, the Dingle note, a little bit maybe off-putting. But it's just different because you're kind of used to Cooley and Great Northern and Middleton stuff. That's at least how I look at it. So I like trying the new stuff that's coming from a lot of these new distilleries. And a lot of them too are just Teeling's another one that's done a lot of stuff with the wine cask finishes, but their pot still is now 5-6 years. So that's another example of something a little different. Does anyone have a favorite of kind of the new distilleries that have kind of come out with stuff recently?
Dingle. And I haven't had a Dingle I don't like yet. I love their. You can tell it's a Dingle no matter which one it is, whether it's a single malt, whether it's their batch, whatever number it is, 1 through 7, their single malt, the blue label single malt. They all have a distinct profile to them.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's the Dingle note. Yeah.
And I don't like the Dingle note at all.
Okay.
And it's unfortunate because I can go visit my family there, but then I don't want to drink with them. So, but I like Killowen, which is doing small batch stuff.
Yep. Yeah,
And
they're very much a cult favorite now, really taking things by storm. They really got a following with their small batch releases.
And then Two Stacks is great. And for a distillery that doesn't have a lot of options, Slane, I tell everybody they just got to have a Slane on their whiskey bar.
Yeah, that's one of the best
So many- Yeah.
blends you can get. You can't really go wrong with that.
And they'll please a lot of people. They'll please the bourbon drinkers and the Scotch drinkers. It may not be the greatest thing for those folks, but they won't spit it out, and,
No,
and
I tell anybody who's a bourbon drinker, like if they're looking for a way to kind of a gateway Irish whiskey, that's the way to start.
and
Because
again, for the price, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, great value whiskey, and it's good. They've got some good stuff coming. They've got it's going to be another. I don't think you'll see anything this year, but next couple of years they're going to be releasing some stuff that's going to be real interesting. When we were there last year as part of the group trip, they're doing a pot still in the column still. So they're not sure what they're going to do with it yet, because you can't call it a single pot still, because it has to be done in pot stills, not the column stills. But we got to sample that in kind of progress, but that'll be real interesting. The technical file has certain limitations, but it'll be very interesting to see what they ultimately call it or how that gets released. But that was one of the interesting things they were doing.
Whoever likes peat, have you tried the Sleeve League?
Mhm.
I think I'm not a peat fan, but I can just, when I taste it, I still feel like it's got a good backbone to it. And I just wish them the best. I think.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a lot of peat stuff coming. Waterford's done some nice stuff. Out of Donegal, there's a few of them. Mickle's got stuff happening with peat. They haven't hit the States yet, but they'll be coming. Yeah, one of the best peat varieties out there is the Mickle Inverin. If you get a chance, if you're traveling, you can get it probably in duty free because you can't get it here. But definitely worth picking up a bottle of that. That's really good. That's actually got a component of that was finished in their peated poachine casks, which makes it really interesting. But
That's near Galway, right?
yep, right in Salt Hill right now. Yep. So, but yeah, there's definitely a lot happening. There's a few distilleries still that haven't released stuff yet in the States that'll be coming soon. So, I think it's worth watching. I mean, you see new things all the time. A lot of it though is independent labels sourced from, say a Great Northern. So, but I think it'll be real interesting. Like one that's going to have stuff. Their first stuff this year is going to be Clonakilty. So they're doing a raffle or whatever you want to call it, lottery for their first release, the single pot still that they did. So everything that they've done prior, they really championed the beer finish with a lot of their stuff in the States, but that was all source stuff. So they've finally got stuff that's come of age that they want to release, and it's a single pot still. So I'm really interested in being able to try that, hopefully at Whiskey Live in a few weeks, because I'm hoping that they'll be pouring that. So kind of on that note, just I don't think anybody on this in this event tonight is joining us, but a few weeks from now we'll be in Ireland for our group trip. So this year it'll be Galway. Last year we were primarily in the Dublin area. But we're going to be visiting several distilleries. I'm kind of unofficially kind of calling this trip the old and the new, because we're going to be hitting some of the brand new distilleries, but we're also going to be going to some of the oldest things. So like as an example, Mickle, one of the newer distilleries, the Burren distillery, brand new, haven't released anything here yet. They just have their one initial launch release, so they don't even have a product yet, officially on the shelves, so to speak. I'm really interested in seeing what they're doing. And then Ahascra's the other one that's has not released any of their own stuff yet. Their stuff sourced. It's now in the States. They launched in Ohio primarily. I think they're in New York as well. So limited state distribution right now. But they've got several, probably 4 or 5 different variety of source stuff. But then on the old side of things, we're going to be going to Sean's Bar and to Kilbeggan. So oldest distillery and oldest pub in Ireland. So kind of a little old and new. And then, of course, we're going to end it with Whiskey Live on the last day. We're going to go to the evening session. So looking forward to that, to be able to try a lot of the new stuff that, has come out, or usually that people release a lot of things right around Whiskey Live. So probably be some surprises along the way too. Does anybody have a trip planned to Ireland this year?
No, but next year I'm going to join you. I'm going to turn in 50 next year, so that'll be my birthday present to myself next year.
All right. Yeah, so unofficially, I'm thinking the base location for next year would probably be Belfast. But want to get through one trip before I start thinking about really planning the next one. But kind of switch coasts back. We'll go back and forth. I think another year later, I think a future trip is definitely to do probably a Killarney base, Kerry, and be able to do like Dingle and Killarney and Skellig and Port McGee. There's a bunch of stuff we can do in that area. So but I think that'll be better in a couple of years because those distilleries will be, 3 to 5 years old by then. So I'm always thinking of something.
Are you going to get to County Mayo at all? Lockmask and that.
Maybe so the Wednesday is like a free day, and there's a chance I might drive up there. I was gonna go there in November and I didn't get to it. It was because it was just a little, I was running out of time. And light. I didn't really feel like driving in the dark in that area because I didn't know it. But I may try to do that on Wednesday. That's not part of the official trip.
Yeah, I was asking if you were going to go into any of the distilleries up there, really.
Yeah, well, Lockmask would be the one. If we do anything there. The other Mayo stuff, no. I think that's a part of it too, is just they're too far away. It's just maybe too long, but like, because we could have done Ackle or which I'd really like to get to again. It's been a few years since I've been there. Or get up to Ballina, but they're all those, that would be very long bus rides for everybody. So these are all within more or less an hour and a half that we're doing. And that's kind of the outside of the limit I like to do. Unless we're going to relocate hotels. But we'll see. I think some of it too is just trying to keep it all as tight as possible. Try to keep things, some things non-whiskey related too. So between the Burren and the Cliffs, and Connemara and some other things, we've got some things for folks who either want to take a break from drinking whiskey or companions that you can get old going to a different distillery every single day.
There's a nice hot chocolate shop up in Burren, and if so, for the people who aren't drinking the whiskey,
What's the name of it?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't know if you knew the name.
Well, I was going to say it's pretty much in the middle of nowhere, but that's by definition, right?
Yeah, I think I know. I think I'm familiar with what you're talking about, though. I can't think of the name myself, but because there's a few cafes and stuff. Because it's not like there's a ton of stuff. So some of the stuff that's there, you kind of stop at because it's not like there's 10 to choose from when you're driving around the Burren. But yeah, no, it'd be great to get more people who can come next year. We'll probably, again, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but a lot of it kind of works backwards off of when Whiskey Live's going to be. And Allie was very nice this year or last year, I should say, to announce this year's Whiskey Live. I want to say he announced a week or two after the Whiskey Live last year, which made it real easy to start planning. Because, if he had waited until Christmas time, it would have been kind of tough. So that was very convenient to start doing the planning for this year's trip. Okay. Any questions on either any of the whiskeys or any of the historical facts that I may have butchered along the way tonight? I should say too, one of the, from a timing perspective, just to tie it all back in, Fighting Irish, why April? So I tied it into some of the historical, but tomorrow is the Notre Dame spring game. So,
I was going to mention that.
so can't get away with doing the Fighting Irish event without a couple more shout outs. But so I hope you enjoyed this. I think it was kind of a fun thing that I wanted to just kind of tie together again. As I mentioned up front, I like the theme based stuff sometimes. So I am planning some things for second half of the year. So next month we'll be in Galway for the trip. But I'm working on a few other things. One with McConnell's. They've been really busy the last couple weeks because they just opened their distillery.
Brand new. Yep.
But I don't know if it's going to happen. I told them the earliest I could do something would be the end of May because it would have to be once we get back. But they've been real busy, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull all the details together and promote it and all that stuff before we leave, which might push it into, summer months. But we'll see. But then I've got a couple other things I'm working on, and I guess the another big future event, probably maybe August-ish, would be our next bottle release. So that's in process. The labels are at the printer, so to speak, being the drafts being worked out. But those should be done in the next few weeks. The liquid's all done. So hopefully by July, the bottles are available. So I'll be releasing some more information on that, probably teasing that a little bit in the May newsletter. And if everything kind of goes semi-smoothly, that'll be available in the next couple months. And then we'll do an event around that, with Wayne from Jack Ryan to kind of lead us through that. So those are a couple things I know for second half of the year. And then usually too, at Whiskey Live, when you got everybody together, it's easier to line some things up. So that'll kind of be how we pull some things together for the second half for future events. So that's kind of probably what'll fill in the gap between now and end of year, and then we'll have the Izzy's again. So that's kind of the plan. Any questions while we're together on anything club related, future events?
Are you talking with Sarah from McConnell's?
Yes and no. I'm dealing with a few different people. So I've emailed with her. I haven't had direct conversations. She's kind of the one I think I have to ultimately will nail down the dates with.
Yeah.
But I've been purposely not pushing it because they've been super busy with the opening and stuff. So I'm kind of, letting them enjoy that because there's no real need to, really rush it or anything like that. So and I look.
That would be
What's that? You muted yourself, Matt.
Oh, sorry. I said that would be a fun one if we can get one with them.
Yeah. So I think what's interesting too with them is when we talked, it was about doing the core range, their bourbon blend and the sherry. Mm-hmm. But next week they're releasing the 20-year-old.
Yep.
So I'm not assuming that'll be part of it because I don't know the full details on that, but I'm thinking it's limited. but you know, if nothing else, it'll be their two offerings that are available here, and we can hear about the distillery and the brand and the two whiskeys. So that would be, I don't know who would be the representative from them. Hadn't been officially decided because of the time difference. It might be her, it might be John, it could be, you know, we'll see. But yeah, so I'm looking for it. We've been trying to do something for actually the last couple of years. I've been talking with them. So I think it'll work out better now with the distillery opening.
Heck yeah.
And then hopefully, if we do the group trip next year to Belfast, we'd have that as well as the Titanic distillery, which is a great take if you're into your Titanic history. And then of course, those are things right in Belfast, but then you've got your, plenty of day trip potential all around, the north there. So. Okay. Just checking out, making sure I'm not missing anything on the chat. Kate, are you in California?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Whereabouts?
The Pasadena area, Los
Okay.
Angeles area. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a group out here that does a lot of tastings as well. Well, several groups because it's a big metropolitan area.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm glad you could join because I know I try to make these as late as I can to allow, because we do get a lot of California signups, but a lot of times people don't actually join. And partly because I think it's just early, probably still coming home from work, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I kind of had no excuse. I ended up double booking. It's actually a day off for me. And then I screwed up because I double booked something and I tried to log in from the phone from the road, but I couldn't. So I had to wait till I got home before I could log in.
No, I appreciate you coming on because we usually have a bunch of California people and it's tough because if we go too late, then we lose some of the East Coast people. So it's nice to get a good distribution of participants.
Yeah, it's still light outside for me.
Yeah, well, we have members in 41 states. So
Question.
Please.
In Ohio, we had a big drop of Irish.
Mm-hmm.
There, it seems to be a lot of Waterford left on the shelves. Is there a particular Waterford that would be better? Because it seems like either no one's buying it or they got a lot of it.
So
because everything else seems to be selling and that seems to be sitting there.
Okay. Yeah, I guess a couple things with that. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what is those stuff. So they came out originally with a lot of what I'll call single release, single farm origin stuff. So they're if you know anything about Waterford and what they're doing, it's organic. They've got dozens of different farms that they're working with, and they trace everything. So like they'll do a release and it's from one farm at one time a year, and then another bottle will be a different farm. And so that's how they start. So a lot of stuff on the shelves is that. And when it came out, it was somewhat pricey for 3-year-old whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
It's a higher proof too. It's a 50% ABV. So, when you're talking $90, give or take 50% ABV, your everyday drinker who might be trying to try an Irish whiskey or start out, maybe that may not be their go-to because of the ABV and the price. Now what they have now is they're about, I want to say they're 5 years now in the give or take. Their latest release, which I've not tried yet, I got to pick up a bottle, is because what they've done is released what they're going to call their core range, and it's the what is it, the Cuvée Kofi, I want to say, is the pronunciation on it. So
I believe
that
we can
might-
get that here.
is that the one that they just released in Ohio?
Yeah. I think I remember seeing Stacy saying something about that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
because they have that, it's in Massachusetts. They have it in New Hampshire. I know it's in Rhode Island too. So that's the bottle I haven't picked up yet. But what that is it's basically a blend of the farms. So they've taken the barley from a bunch of their farms and blended it together to make a single malt, as opposed to one specific farm. So that's where I would start. I'll say this: it was pricey when it came out,
Mhm.
but at the time, because I picked up 2 of the original bottles, I still have some of it. I thought for 3 to 3.5-year-old, whatever it was, whiskey, it was very good. To me, it showed promise. Like, okay, this stuff at 50%, it was very drinkable. Particularly for how young it was. So it's kind of like, all right, these guys, it seems like they know what they're doing, because and it's going to get better, as it matures more. So the stuff now, I think, is a little bit older. That's probably where I'd go. And I think and the prices come down too. Not sure about Ohio, because that's state controlled, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what the pricing is and how that works there, but I do know that the pricing has come down on the latest releases.
Yeah, I'm going to say $60 to $100. There's like 3 or 4 different, depending on the store, 3 or 4 different
Okay.
bottles.
But yeah, I would go with the Cuvée one. You'll note the difference in the label. It's got a lot of, it looks almost like Christmas lights
Color, yes.
versus the other ones. The single farm ones are more what I'd call a plain label and just have the name of the farm on it, so you can kind of tell the difference. That's where I would start. I can't say I've had it yet, but I have talked to other people that said it's good.
Okay, I'll get one then.
And I do like, I had I think I had the Dunmore and the Gaia were the 2 farms that I had. And I remember, and I've gone back to them a couple times. I still like them. And I remember coming away thinking, again, a lot of it, some people just want to drink a whiskey. They don't want to, it's kind of like, you don't want to know how the sausage is made, kind of thing. So you can get really in the weeds with what they're doing in terms of tracing the barley and the time of year and time of day and all that stuff. So it's kind of good in a way, because if you're into that, you can really geek out and get into all that, how it's made. But having said all that, I think the whiskey itself is pretty good too. So if you don't want to deal with all that, you can just drink the whiskey. But yeah, so that's a very interesting experiment what they're doing down there.
It seems like it was a presentation more than the whiskey. The bottle looks really pretty on the shelf.
Yep. Yeah. The bottles are pretty striking. You got that blue, the beveled glass. Yep. So it pops on the shelf, which is important too, because so many different brands now. It's funny. There are a lot of arguably what you're paying for with some of these brands is the bottling, because I would argue their bottles probably cost more than average. Same thing with Dingle. A lot of what you're paying for with a Dingle bottle is the glass. All that. There's a lot that goes into those versus some of the other stuff. So, as long as you don't mind paying a few dollars more. But Ohio really did a big push into Irish whiskey in the last month or 2.
Correct.
Yeah. So quite a few things. So you got the Sleeve League stuff. I think you got Wayward stuff with the Liberator series is there, and some of the Ahascras there.
Yeah, it just depended on where they dropped it at. You
Okay.
couldn't get it at every store.
Okay. Do they do shipping between stores?
No.
No. Okay.
Let's see.
Yeah, I haven't done it in a while, but I've gone on and looked to see what Ohio carries from time to time.
Hmm.
It's funny, some of the state controlled stuff, they get stuff that others don't.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell. I can tell tonight what I can go buy tomorrow morning.
Oh yeah, that part I like. It's like, so I'm close to New Hampshire. So I like the fact that I can go on and see what they have in every store. Pennsylvania gets stuff that you can't get in other states. Same thing, it's like right now I can't get anything from any of the Liberator or anything from Ahascra, not available here. So, which is, again, it's kind of like every state's its own country as far as trying to get
Yes.
whiskey into it. So they tend to go for California and Texas, Florida, New York. So the fact that a lot of them jumped into Ohio was interesting. One of the ones that they also did a big push. I'm wondering if the state controlled stuff is easier to work with, ironically, because there's been a push into New Hampshire as well. For Cullen just released a couple exclusive to the New Hampshire liquor store system. One's a 22-year-old single malt. It's a Marsala finish. And then the other is a 5-year-old cask single malt. So, which, so those are exclusive to New Hampshire. So interesting. It's good though, because you're seeing, for Collins, another one I didn't mention earlier that, so if you're looking to try stuff from some of the newer distilleries, their stuff's come of age, so that you can get, I want to say 3 or 4 different products from Powers Court now. So the for Cullen Falls blend, they've got their core range single malt, which is a non-age statement. It's like 4 to 5 years. They've got a 15-year-old single grain. I want to say a Madeira finish that's in the States. So those are 3 that are then some of those limited releases I mentioned. But if you pick up a bottle of their single malt, will give you an idea of what the cask is that the Whiskey Society has aging there right now, because it's a bourbon cask, so what are we in now? Our bourbon cask is now, it turned 5 in January. So we're going on 5.5 years. So a little more than halfway there before we can, we got to get to 10 years before we can bottle it. But if you're kind of looking for an idea of what's to come, I think our cask was laid down, 3 months into their distilling. So it's pretty much the same stuff that they're bottling now. If you're looking to get an idea of what's maybe to come. All right. Well, why don't we wrap up? Because we don't know what time it is, but yeah, I went beyond our time, but that's fine because we're having good conversation. So no, I do appreciate you guys joining in tonight. Again, I don't like to listen to myself babble all along, so it's good to have conversation from the group and feedback. But again, I'll keep you posted. I gave you a little bit of a tease on some things coming up over the next few months. We'll be you can follow our exploits as we wreak havoc in Galway next month. Hopefully we won't cause too much trouble. We don't lose anybody this year. Frank, will miss you this year, but maybe next year. But yeah, so again, good seeing you all tonight, and we'll see you down the road.
Thank you, Allan.
Yeah,
All right.
thank you, Allan.
All right, thanks again, and
Thank you. Thanks,
have a good
everybody.
weekend, everyone.
Slanja.
All right, go Fighting Irish.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, Alan.
Night.
Right.